Whirlwind last four. Thank you. The past 4 weeks have been just an incredible experience. Everything that I've been learning from Joe Whitlow, who was here prior, has been just an incredible experience. And then the board members that have been bringing me on in the community, really re-engaging the community. My family's from here. I've been in Boston the last 20 years. And to escape and get back up here, it's been just a really overwhelming, great experience. So I appreciate it. We've got a lot of great events coming up, so please look at some of the flyers. June 12th, 19th, and 26th, we have the Best of Workshop. Those tickets are $10. They'll be right out here. And please come enjoy some of the special events we have going on. So we've got a busy summer of events. So tonight we have John Macone, who's going to be giving us a lecture on the history of Lower Merrimack River. You're going to really enjoy it. So I've been reading up on him, and he's going to be a fantastic lecture tonight. So please enjoy it. So please give a warm welcome to John.
Oh, this is great, being in front of real people instead of little TV screens. And we have wine and beer. That's even better. That's great. So thank you so much for inviting me. My name is John Macone. I used to be the editor of the Daily News. I left that to pursue a new career, which was to try to protect this river and to keep it as clean as possible for the next generation. Thank you. So that's what we do at the Merrimack River Watershed Council. We've been around since 1976, and you probably remember what the river was like back then. It was multicolored, and nothing lived in it. And now things have really changed. I'm going to get into that in this presentation. But there's always more to do, and that's what we're doing now. There's new challenges that are coming up, and we're working on things like dam removal and trying to combat climate change. Try to control the amount of development that dumps pollutants into this river, and just make this river safer and cleaner and better for our children and children's children, because so many people actually drink out of this river. It's amazing how many people drink out of it. So with that, I'm going to just give you a brief summary of what I'm going to do. We're actually going to talk a little bit about the northern part of the river, too. I hope I don't get kicked out for doing that. I'm going to get into that a bit because it's very important. What goes on upstream affects what we see right here. So it's a big part of the story. We're going to cover about 12,000 years of history, so we'll be out of here around 4 a.m. Everyone, I'm just kidding. I hope. All right, so let's get right to it. Okay, so this is the Merrimack River Valley. It looks like I spilled coffee on a map, but this is this huge area. Kind of looks like a blotch, but here's just a few facts just to give you a grounding about this river. 117 miles long. This is the 4th largest river in New England behind, anyone know some of the bigger ones? Connecticut. Connecticut, that's right, that's number 1. Anyone know number 2? It's another big one, it's in Maine, Penobscot. And then the Kennebec just barely squeezes us out. We almost made number 3. But this last fact is the most amazing to me. 600,000 people drink their primary drinking water out of this river. And that number is increasing. As water sources start to disappear, this river becomes much more vital to our daily existence. So you look at that map and you can't really tell, okay, well, why is it such a blotch? So you're going to be familiar with these places. These are sort of the boundaries of where this water that's flowing by is coming from. Franconia Notch, if you've been up there, that water flows by here. This is Mount Wiley. It's up near Mount Washington Hotel. We've stayed there. That's coming down here, the Flume. All the water that you see flowing through these places end up going by us here. Eagle Lake, which is very high in the White Mountains. Lake Winnipesaukee. Waterville Valley. Mount Monadnock, has anyone ever hiked up there? So that mountain on the eastern side, all the water that comes off it comes into the Merrimack River. Mount Wachusett is in central Mass. Again, the eastern side of it comes our way, western goes to Connecticut. Where the marathon starts is actually in the Merrimack River Watershed, where the revolution started, American Revolution, where the Industrial Revolution started. So we've got a lot of history to cover. So I want to talk to you about, okay, how did this river come to be? And it's kind of amazing to think that there was this long period when this earth we're on right now was covered in ice. For tens of thousands of years, it was actually an ice sheet on top of us that was 1 mile to 2 miles thick above our heads, pushing the earth down. Everything here was dead. The landscape was really unknown of what was under it. So this is a map of how huge this ice sheet was during the Ice Age. It starts to melt, and water does all kinds of interesting things when it starts moving. Creates all of this landscape that we see around us, all these hills that we see, and there's these interesting features in the land. There's one particular one in Newburyport. It's called the Kettle Hole. It's a very prominent location in it. Does anyone know what that location is? Rock Pond. Yeah, at the Mound. That pond there was formed by a glacier, by a piece of a glacier that melted right there. So this shaped our landscape, and it shaped our river. In fact, it shaped it so much that we think there was a river before the Merrimack, and it was basically destroyed by the glacier, and it became a lake when all of this water melted. The headwaters of that lake were in Lowell, and you can see on this map where Newburyport is, this one over here. Newburyport was not even on the coast, not even along the Merrimack River at that time. Eventually, there's so much water here in this valley that it broke through and it wound its way out to the ocean. So one curious thing about the Merrimack is I mentioned these 4 rivers earlier, and if you look at this map, you can see 3 of them go straight down, north-south, right to the ocean. Then we've got our river. Does this funny little hook. What is that all about? Well, it's thought that before the Ice Age, the Merrimack actually entered into Boston Harbor. And there was so much detritus that was left by the glaciers around the Lowell area that the river couldn't do that anymore. It just winded its way out to the coast, right here in Newburyport. So there was this period after the ice had melted when the earth had actually been pushed downward by the weight of all that ice. And so this area was flooded. Where we were standing now, we would be drowning. The water would probably be another 20 feet above our heads. So this entire region was under the ocean. Over a period of time, the earth started to lift its way up, and our coastline started to form. So this is a map here to give you an idea of what happened with Plum Island. You know, we look at it today, we think it must have always been there. Well, it's really pretty new. It's only about 3,000 or 4,000 years old. Originally, the coast was very far out from here. It's about 3 miles further out from where it is now. And that's why you find things like this tooth that was found in the ocean off of Plum Island. This is a mammoth tooth. So these animals were on the land at the time, but the land was much further out. So Earth keeps coming up, and the ocean is pushing all the sand that had come down the Merrimack River, and it starts to form what we know of today as Plum Island. One of the interesting things we find on Plum Island, I'll bet you some people have seen this, is purple sand. Has anyone seen this out there? So that is very unique to the Merrimack. It's here because of the Merrimack River. That purple sand is actually ground up pieces of garnet and pink quartz that came from the White Mountains and came down the Merrimack and deposited along our coastline. So it's really an interesting feature that we have here. So I want to give you a little history, a kind of early history of what was going on with the Merrimack. You know, it's interesting today that for 10,000 years of human existence here, this river was a highway. You know, this is how you got everywhere. Today, you know, we're in an unusual period. We don't use it as a highway. We wouldn't know what's 50 miles above us, but certainly people for all that time knew this river very well. It started with Paleo Indians who had migrated up here, and this river was just thick with resources for them. There are a lot of falls that go up it. There were millions of fish that would migrate up it, and so you would find that there were locations along the river where there was places that were perfect for fishing. There were falls, particularly in Manchester, New Hampshire, and Lowell, where there were very large falls. One of the oldest sites of human habitation is on the Merrimack, and that's in Manchester, New Hampshire. This is where Native Americans would come every spring, and fish are trying to go up that falls, and they have to stop in pools and rest, and that's where you get them, right? So that was a very important place for Native Americans to be. Another place perhaps you've not heard of is right across from us on the opposite bank. There is a 9,000-year-old burial mound that is also a Native American site. So they were moving up and down this river, and they were using the resources depending on the time of year and what would be there that they could eat or use to survive. Native tribe was Wabanakis. This was a massive tribe that lived throughout the Northeast. It's an example of what a village might have looked like. So all along the river, as I mentioned, there were these sites. There's a fairly famous one in Andover. This just gives you kind of a visual of what a Native American site would have looked like. And this was a Pennacook tribe, which is a very local tribe to this area. Contrary to what I guess popular thought is, Native Americans did know something about metal, and this is fascinating. This was found just upriver from here, around the Merrimack port. This is made out of copper. This is a Native American spear point, and this would have come from 1,000 miles from here, from the Ohio River Valley. So there was trade that was going on. There's very large deposits of copper out there, and so these were pounded. They were not smelted, they were pounded into spearheads. So interesting find here on the Merrimack. And of course, we are so familiar with these names, these Native American names. They're all around us, and they all have meaning. Merrimack River is thought to mean Sturgeon River, or perhaps fast-moving river. Pentucket, I'm sure you've heard of, Powell Hill in Amesbury, Amesbury, that's in Manchester. That's this falls I was mentioning. Shawsheen River means snake. That's up around Andover. So things suddenly take a very dramatic turn for Native Americans. 1628, when settlement in Massachusetts Bay comes into being. The Merrimack is really vital to that settlement because, for one thing, they discovered this is an incredible source of food. There are so many fish moving up and down this river that fishing becomes an important role for people here. And the other thing is the Merrimack defines the northern border of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The border is defined as being 3 miles north of the Merrimack. At that time, they thought the Merrimack went east to west, maybe to the west coast of wherever that west coast might be, way over there. So really kind of unclear. And so there was an expedition that was sent up shortly after the Massachusetts Bay was founded to say, hey, we got to find out where this river goes so we can plot out where this 3 mile above it mark is. Well, they didn't realize it suddenly took a sharp turn at Lowell and went further north, way up into Lake Winnipesaukee. And so when they got there, they left a marker. They carved the marker in a rock, and it sort of disappeared for many years. It was found in a river around Weirs Beach. Anyone ever been up there to Weirs Beach? So there's a park there, and you can see this stone where our forefathers in Massachusetts, laid down their territory. This is the northern end of our province. Of course, that's not what ended up happening. But when you look at the maps of early New England, you start to see how important the Merrimack is. I mean, it is the highway. You can see it in the middle of this, just snaking right through. And also on this map, right in the heart of it. And then by that point, 1670s, they've got a pretty good idea of where the Merrimack is, and you can see how far they've explored. They've got the Lake Winnipesaukee on that, as well as some of the mountains that I mentioned earlier. So we're going to start to talk a little bit about Newburyport now. Newburyport is settled 1630s as Newbury. You have this movement that comes to the river, the shipbuilding. This becomes a commercial area. And is anyone here a mariner? Anybody go out in boats trying to get out the mouth here? Isn't it wonderful? It's just the easiest thing. It's terrible. It's awful. So why would they be so successful here? That's a question. Well, this river is such a huge resource, and this is your highway into a vast amount of wood to build ships, and also to conduct trade upriver. But there's a couple of problems, and that's those falls I mentioned earlier. There's two really big not waterfalls, but gradual falls that you wouldn't want to take a boat down. One is the Amesbury, that's in Manchester, and the other one's called the Pawtucket. Now, those are the heights of them. They're quite a drop when you get to them. Can't bring a boat. The only way to get around them is a portage, or you could create a canal. And so Newburyport is very interested in that. So here's a current view of the Pawtucket Falls. Has anyone ever been to this area? Great. It's very interesting. If you ever go up there, check it out. It's really fascinating to see what you're going to find up there. Relates to Newburyport. So a Newburyport company, I'm very interested to see one of the people who's displayed over in your new exhibit is one of the people who did this, who is one of the founders of this company called the Proprietors of Locks and Canals. And they formed in around 1792 because they wanted to keep getting all of this wood and these resources down to Newburyport. But they couldn't get through the Pawtucket Falls very easily. So they built this incredible canal called the Pawtucket Canal that goes around it and gets those boats down to Newburyport. It was such a great idea that it was stolen by Boston. And so some heavy-hitting names, John Hancock, John Adams, all these founding scions of Massachusetts decide they're going to make their own canal. And so they built their own canal that went from Lowell to Boston. It's called the Middlesex Canal, right? And it opened a few years after Newburyport's canal opened. And unfortunately for Newburyport, that started to change the direction that flow of materials that were coming from the river. Another place I mentioned earlier is Amesbury. This is in Manchester, New Hampshire. Another really tough place to get around. A canal was built there in 1808. So now you've got these connecting links, and there's some other places where smaller canals are built. But by now, around 1810, you can get up and down the Merrimack River pretty easily in a boat. And so this opens it up to more expansion for people who want to start to settle up there. And Newburyport has its eye, no doubt, upriver. This is a place where we want to be, and we want to be trying to control it. So that kind of leads into our next chapter, and that is that the river around the 1820s starts to transform into a source of power to power industry. And it really, if it weren't for Newburyporters, this probably wouldn't have happened. This is our Industrial Revolution. So I want to point out two Newburyporters and a who are absolutely the foundations of why this happened. Francis Cabot, Lowell, and Patrick Tracy Jackson, brothers-in-law. They're here in Newburyport. They're very successful in the shipping trade. Francis Cabot Lowell is probably one of our most interesting industrial espionagers, I suppose you could say. So he goes to England just before the War of 1812, and they allow him to go into some of the factories. And this this is top secret stuff the English are doing with textile mills. He goes in and he starts to see, and he's thinking, wow, this is where we're going. I've got to get a handle on this. He memorizes what he sees, and he heads back to Newburyport. On his way back, his ship is searched, his stuff is searched, because they're sure he's got plans in there. Can't find anything, it's all in his head. He gets back here, and he contacts his fellow Paul Moody. Paul Moody, at this point, is in Amesbury, and he's working on a mill over there. He's trying to put this together, because this concept is kind of known, that you can create these machines. He tells him what he's found. Paul Moody is brilliant, and he starts to actually design new looms. In fact, he improves on the designs that the English are building. They set up basically an experimental mill in Waltham on the Charles River. But the Charles River is not the Merrimack. You just don't have the same amount of flow coming down it, so they need another place. In the meantime, unfortunately, Francis Cabot Lowell passes away. His brother-in-law steps up really to run this company that they formed, and they decide on Lowell. Remember that canal they built? Thinking, oh, we can somehow start to tie this canal into this idea of this model city that Francis Cabot Lowell has thought about and drawn up. And so they create Lowell, and Lowell is named for Francis Cabot Lowell by his colleagues. So Lowell is really more or less a reflection of Newburyport, of Newburyporters looking to the future. So Lowell is this first great industrial city that's built in the United States. This model city of how they're going to create a new industrial power. But the Merrimack is such a powerful river. There's so many opportunities for this that you start to see similar enterprises going up pretty much anywhere where there's some falls on the river. Amesbury here in Manchester. Lawrence also has a very slight bit of a falls, and so Lawrence is built at this time too. But one of the problems they have is they can't really manage the water very well as it's just flowing down the river. They need to start building dams so that you can build this incredible infrastructure of a dam that controls the water, and then canals that go along the river, basically parallel to the river, and then you have basically sluiceways that would go through the factories and power the looms coming off of those canals and dumping back into the river. These are incredibly huge human enterprises to do, but you really need a dam as the basis of it. And so dams are starting to be constructed. One is built at the Amesbury with those falls. Great Stone Dam is built in, that's the first dam you're going to come to if you go up the river. This is in Lawrence. It's actually the largest dam in the world at the time. And it's still there, and it's still in perfect condition. And this was dry laid by manual labor. It's amazing that it's in such great condition. Another dam is built in Lowell, so that's why we have so many dams on the river. These are to power these mills. And Lowell really takes a cake for creating this vast collection of interconnected canals to power all of these looms. Has anyone been to Lowell and checked out these canals? Yeah. Fascinating. If you haven't been there, check it out. It's just an amazing amount of engineering that's done. And a lot of this is done by Paul Moody. So it's a reflection again of Newburyport. Lawrence also has 2 canals. They still exist. Manchester has 2 canals too. Those have been filled in. If you go to Manchester today and you go through the mill yard, you'll find these really wide boulevards that you drive through. Those were actually canals that were filled in about 40, 50 years ago. To give you a sense of just how impactful this is on this region. So these are the populations at different times. So 1840, take a look. Lowell is number 1. Newburyport is the second most populated city along the Merrimack at that time. 80 years later, Newburyport is the smallest. The population has exploded upriver as these factories have succeeded. But you know, with factories and all that they're doing, it creates a kind of pollution problem that has never been seen before. And so it takes the next 150, 200 years to tackle that. Well, our first person on the scene who starts to see what's going on, our first observer, kind of our first environmentalist, is Henry David Thoreau. So he goes on a canoe trip, 1839. So think about some of the dates I showed you earlier. This is just shortly after Lowell is founded and all these other cities. He's there right at the beginning. And he starts to see that the fisheries that have been so prevalent here are basically destroyed by the dams. There's erosion along the riverbanks. He calls the river a mere wastewater compared to what it had been because of the dams. And then above Lowell, he starts to notice that the water is sort of this yellowish color, and he doesn't really know what's going on with that. But it's a sandy silt. But it seems obvious today what is happening, what he's seeing. I'm sure you've all been to the White Mountains and seen all the beautiful trees, and it looks primeval. Well, it wasn't in those days. This is what the White Mountains looked like. They were basically being destroyed because of all the lumber that was there. There were rail lines that were going up into the mountains to harvest lumber out of them. And the problems were so bad that the mountains themselves were eroding down. You know, we get a big rainstorm, and it would just push this unprotected soil down into the Merrimack River. It was impacting the mills significantly. They actually had to shut down the mills at different times. There were also wildfires that were happening because it was just clear cut. You know, it was the perfect scenario that you see out west these days. And some of these fires I've noted in this some of these are on the scale of the fires that you hear that were going on in the west that made the news today. And this was a natural disaster that was happening at this northern end of the Merrimack River. But things start to change. Is anyone a member of the Appalachian Mountain Club here? So I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's formed in 1876, and the idea of it was people were going to the White Mountains. You could get there by train at that time. People were exploring these beautiful mountains, but they were also seeing all this destruction, and they wanted to see some kind of change happen. So there was sort of an environmental movement that was being started at that time. New Hampshire was paying very close attention to this and wanted to do something, and there was a small group that was started, a Society for Protection of New Hampshire Forests, and their idea is they were going to privately buy as much land as they could to protect the Merrimack River. They started with a flume, and then they just kept expanding. They still exist today. They have tens of thousands of acres in preservation. But probably the most important thing that happened is around 1911, this bill was passed by a man who's from the Merrimack Valley, and he's seen what's happened. His name is John Weeks, and he passes this bill through Congress that creates our national forest system. And that idea is done specifically, in his mind, to protect the Merrimack River. And he, a few years later, he sees the creation of the White Mountain National Forest, which is now the largest national forest in New England, one of the larger ones in the United States. So that really protects the upper Merrimack from what's happening, you know, environmentally. But downstream, we've got a whole other problem that's going on. So Massachusetts is paying very close attention to the Merrimack because this is really a gold mine. There's so much business here, so many people, but there are also people getting sick because people are actually drinking out of this river. And so in 1908, I'll just give you a kind of a quick synopsis of what they're seeing. This incredibly polluted water. People had been drinking out of it. It's really not a good source for drinking water, though it needs to be. All of the cities along it are simply dumping sewage into the river through pipes, and that's how it was back then. You know, every drop of water that would come off a street or out of your house would go through a pipe into the river, and then it would just, you know, go away. Or that was the thought. Not a good thought, because clearly, you know, there's a lot of pollution that's in the river. Massachusetts decided we've got to do something. Let's push the pipes a little bit further out into the river. Maybe someday we'll start to create this new idea of sewage treatment plants. But really nothing gets done at that time, 1900s. 1948, there's a law that's passed. It starts to crystallize in the United States, you know, that we need to protect water. It doesn't quite get it done, though. It's really not until people start to see what's happening. So this is the Nashua River. Does anybody remember this kind of stuff? This is, you know, when the mills would use a certain color dye during the day, they would just dump it into the river, and the river would be all different colors. And of course, it was a great place to dump barrels and all kinds of junk, because that's what you did in a stinky, you know, multicolored river. But this was going on all over the United States. And people were getting fed up. And this last image I'm showing you is, I'm sure some of you recognize it. This is the Cuyahoga River in Ohio, a river that actually caught fire. It was so polluted. And at that point, people had had enough. Something had to change. One of the things that happens in the Merrimack, people start to, you know, mobilize, and they start to create nonprofit organizations to try to protect the river, do something. Something that the government wasn't doing. Nashua River is one of our first in our region. But the most important thing that happens is a Clean Water Act is passed in 1972. And that has sort of a carrot and a stick to it. It's encouraging communities to build sewage treatment plants by pumping billions of dollars across the country to communities to build them. But it's also placing standards on them. If they don't get it done, then they're going to get fined. And so that works really well. So here's an idea of what, you know, we talk about 50 years ago, what the Merrimack was like. So there was a study done just before these sewage plants start to go online. This is what it was like. 45.6 billion gallons of sewage going into it every year. So to give you a perspective, last year we had 822 million gallons of sewage. So multiple times of what we see today. Newburyport's the only community along the entire river that's actually built a sewage treatment plant. And you've got communities that are still drinking out of it, so something's got to be changed. The group I belong to is formed right around this time, again, to try to pump up what's happening on the Merrimack and to bring attention to it and to get funding going in the right directions. Funding does start to go in the right direction. We start to see all these sewage treatment plants that open up along the Merrimack. And now there's over 40 of them. Every community that's supposed to have one has one. And for the most part, we see no sewage going in except when it rains. Another important thing that happens is there's all sorts of groups, private groups, government groups that start to buy up land along the river to protect it. And the idea is this land that's along the river, this natural land, is a sponge, and it protects the river from pollutants that might flow into it from industrial areas or even from our own homes, you know, from the fertilizers and whatnot that we use. This is a really important thing that happens. When you look at a map of the Merrimack and you see how much of it is protected, it's pretty amazing. You can walk for many miles along the Merrimack on protected land these days. And there's just this network of people now, all different types of people who are cleaning up, you know, doing advocacy work, getting people out on the river so that people enjoy it, and restoring the riverbanks. So this is sort of a community effort in many ways too, that's protecting this river. So I'll talk a little bit about what is the future of this river. So this is a picture that was, you probably recognize this location. This is right near us here. This is a river view that was taken right after Hurricane Irene. This is sewage and wastewater and runoff coming out of the Merrimack into the ocean right off Plum Island and Salisbury Beach. So one of these issues that is in our future, I mentioned that we still dump sewage into this river during these big storms. This is because of the way these cities were plumbed back in the 1800s. We still haven't fixed that problem yet. So right now, there's a great opportunity. You probably heard about the infrastructure law that was passed this year by Congress. This allows a lot of money to start to flow back to communities, much like happened in the 1970s when the sewage plants were built. There are also new contaminants that are coming into this river. One of the sources of them is New Hampshire. It's something called PFAS. Has anyone heard of PFAS? Forever chemicals. This is a carcinogen, excuse me, that it gets into our river and into our water supply. It's a very big concern these days. There's a factory along the Merrimack in New Hampshire where there are actually hundreds of people whose private wells have had to be shut down, and they get water delivered to them because they can't drink their own water. We want to make sure that contamination doesn't end up affecting our river. And then storm runoff from these storms. The more we develop, the more we see that there's contaminants that flow into the river. Another thing is, as I mentioned, is just protecting land. And right now, the area we're focused on is in northern New Hampshire, where so much of the Merrimack's water comes from. 2/3 of the Merrimack's water comes from New Hampshire. And so it's important that we try to protect as much of this buffer area in New Hampshire as we can. So that's one of the focuses of my group and other groups as well right now. And also limiting development right along the riverbank. There's certainly a lot of it that's happened, but we don't want to see the entire riverbank become paved in this area where contaminants can just flow right in. And then lastly, the new problem that we're all thinking about is what is going to be the impact of climate change. And is anyone here a member of Storm Surge, or have you gone to? So Storm Surge in Newburyport here does a great job of laying out for people what's happening to Newburyport and how rising sea levels and these storm surges are going to impact the city. And Newburyport has done a terrific job of trying to plan for it. But this is a massive problem, and it affects communities uprivers too as well. We're going to see these large-scale rainstorms like we did last July. It was so wet, there was so much water, so much sewage that flowed into the river, and then very dry spells. These are the weather patterns that it's thought we're going to have in the future due to climate change. And this is going to change the river. So there are a lot of things that need to be done. We need to control how much water flows into the river during these storms, and we need to help the riverbanks to remain robust. Right now we're seeing at some of the dams upriver that there's more trees falling into the Merrimack, more than the dam operators have ever seen. So it's very important to start thinking about how we're going to protect this land, where we're going to have to create this buffer, and plant trees and keep this area as safe as possible, as healthy as possible. So I do want to leave you with one good news story after all those kind of bummer things. So Sturgeon, I mentioned this is called the Sturgeon River. Has anyone seen a sturgeon? In the river, right. All right, so that's really cool. I want to give you a little, there were thousands and thousands of sturgeon in this river at one time. The dams impacted them, the pollution impacted them. There was a time in 1996 where it was thought there might be 20 sturgeon in the river, and there'd probably soon be none. Well, this is something that was found in 2021. Just last year, there was a survey done up the river during the winter, and they were doing a side scan, and they were trying to see if there were sturgeon in the river. In fact, they found that there were over 4,000 of them that were overwintering. This is an image of what they look like in the bottom. They just lay next to each other in these rows, sort of hibernating. This is up around Hampshire. It just happens to coincide with a collection of Native American settlement sites, too. There's no coincidence to that whatsoever. So that's a good news story for the Merrimack. If we do the right thing, nature will resiliently come back. So it's a positive story. So that's the end. I heard I shouldn't go on too long, so just wanted to give you 12,000 years of history in whatever, 30 minutes. Yes.
About the sewage overflow, is there some other place the sewage plants can put the effluent other than the river? In other words, is there a big hole somewhere that they can put it in the earth? Are there trucks that they can take someplace to fill one of these bottomless holes, sinkholes?
Mm-hmm.
There must be something else they can do other than putting it in the river.
Yeah, you're right. There are things they can do. So it's expensive to do it.
So what?
So that's one of the things they can do is they can create these vast underwater, underground tanks, basically, to hold that sewage and then process it when the rains have stopped. The other thing that they more commonly do, and this is what our government encourages them to do, is to take these old sewage lines that bring in water from the street and from the sewer and split them so that the water this is what's done here in Newburyport. So the water that comes off the street goes directly into the river, and the sewage stays with the sewage plant. So there are some issues with that too, but that's better than if we dump raw sewage into the river.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
What happens to the canals, and what about public boating? How is that going?
With the canal, boating in the canals?
The Middlesex Canal, and those are all shut down?
Yeah, the Middlesex Canal is gone. I think there may be some pieces of it left. The Lowell canals you can get into. In fact, if you go to Lowell National Historic Park, they have a barge that they take you down the river. They actually open the locks, and you get to see all this incredible engineering. Manchester doesn't have it anymore, and Lawrence has dropped the level of its canals. It's kind of interesting in Lawrence because, these buildings that were along there were all factories, and now they're turning into housing, and these canals actually leak. They leak water into the buildings. And so people say, hey, I don't want water, in the basement of my building. So they've lowered the canals. If you go to Lawrence, you'll see they're very low now. Yes, ma'am?
Last winter, early in the morning, I noticed a seal had hauled out by catchment. So I called the Marine Mammal Rescuer, and they came out, and they looked at it, and they said, sadly, it was loaded with parasites. This person said, because all the fish in the river are loaded with parasites. Did you know anything about that? Or?
I'm not sure what that parasite would be. I know that, that there's sort of a lot of people don't eat fish out of the river.
Clearly, they shouldn't.
Yeah. I'm not sure what that would have been, though. Yes, ma'am.
Just curious what the priorities are for your organization. What are you focusing on for your important efforts?
Well, right now, one of the priorities is making sure that, and I mentioned this huge amount of federal money, that it goes to places like Lowell. That's where most of the sewage is coming from now. Lowell, we want to see it go there. We want to see Lowell get their problems fixed so that we can stop this sewage from going into the river. We're also working on some projects like taking down dams upriver from here, and that allows fish to go up the river. There's some great success stories on this river about that. For example, the Sturgeon River. Some of the dams were taken down. That was historically a spawning ground for herring, and they hadn't been able to get up there in about at least 100 years.
Where is this?
This is in the Sturgeon River in Andover. The next year after they took the dams down, the herring started to run back up the river. So, if we start to do these things, we're going to see some important changes that happen. We're also working very closely in the state of New Hampshire to put up these buffers, these tree buffers and protective buffers around the Merrimack to prevent erosion. Yes, sir.
I have a question and also a reflection. My question is that, so Newburyport 1635 or so, it wasn't until 1790 that there was the first bridge crossing over. So there was ferries, and there was a major ferry, if you want, or an important ferry, at the base of Jefferson Street up the river a little bit, over to Carr's Island. And I've gone there and I've watched, and the river is, you know, fairly wide, but then here you got this big Carr's Island in the middle of it, and it channels on both sides of it. The water's moving pretty quickly there. I haven't been able to get an answer on how did the ferry get across? I mean, was it a rope, the whole thing, or was it poles, or do you have any idea on that?
I know on the opposite side, on the back side, that there was a floating
A
bridge.
floating bridge, correct.
On this side, I'm not sure if they pulled. I can't imagine. I mean, I hear you. That flows really fast there.
It's a fast flow.
Maybe they
And
will.
And then my reflection is, and I'm just sharing, maybe all of us have seen this, I tend to walk a lot, and I walk along the river a lot. And this is there's a lot of volume of water coming down. And my reflection is that there's tides that come in. And every once in a while I see that point, I think they call it the slack tide, where the river just is stopped.
Yeah.
And it's just flat, and I just marvel at that. I kind of think of it like an arm wrestle. You know, the ocean's pushing this way and the river's pushing this way, and there's that little equilibrium point. I just find that really fascinating.
That's when the ferries went.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. And some people have pointed that out, but that's only
It's
only a half hour,
twice a day.
maybe twice a day. And it would vary depending on the height of the tides and the moon, and interesting point, but I don't think commerce would have worked well, you know.
Yeah, it's one of the fastest moving rivers. I mean, that's why we have this surf station here with the Coast Guard. There's very few surf stations, but it's here because the mouth of the river is so dangerous because of that flow, unusually dangerous.
That's why I have those boats that roll.
Yeah, that's right. They actually capsize. They strap in like astronauts or something. Yeah.
How safe is Newburyport's drinking water?
Newburyport is safe. So Newburyport does not get its drinking water from the Merrimack. Gets it from the Artichoke. But the concern about Newburyport's water is that there's a dam. If you go up 113 towards West Newbury, you go to that kind of dip between the towns, and you look over and there's a dam there. So as the Merrimack rises, if we get, the worst scenario is we get one of these torrential rainstorms and all kinds of sewage flows into the Merrimack, and the water is so high that it actually backs up over that dam and goes into Newburyport's water supply. And so Newburyport has been looking at how do we raise this dam so that that doesn't happen. So that's something I think that's been discussed in the city quite a bit. Yes, sir.
What else do you know about the two Native American sites that you mentioned, the one in Manchester and the one in Andover? Are they protected by the states that they're in? Are they open to the public at all? Is there any kind of interpretation there? Is there a way for the public to get on the site and see where people used to live? Has there been archaeological excavation?
Yeah, so unfortunately the Manchester site is a parking lot, and there's a building built on top of it. So you can't see anything. But there are excavations that were done there. There's a fantastic city museum, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, in Manchester. Really first-rate city museum that has a lot of the artifacts and explains all of this. Andover, that is on public land. The site is, and there, if you go down to a place called the Rattel Reservation or Deer Jump Reservation, it's in that area, near Route 93, that crosses the Merrimack. So you can walk it, and they've got some signs there that you can see.
And the mound you mentioned, is that on Rings Island, or where is it on the other side?
Yeah, it's further down. It's public land, but it's not marked in any way, and it's directly across the river from us. I've been trying to find more information about it. There's no markings there of what it is, but I think about, okay, why would this be here? 9,000 years ago, there would be no Plum Islands. There would be, there would be nothing out there. So it must have been just kind of like the last piece of dry land that there was before you went into the ocean. Trying to think if there's any other sites. There are plenty of museums that have artifacts, but there's no place along the Merrimack where you're, going to find something you can see, I guess.
There's a house by the Kent Street Park, 1 block over close to the river, that has a big display window of artifacts they found in the Merrimack. It's kind of interesting.
Interesting, yeah. You can only imagine what's out there. All right. Any questions? Well, great. Thank you so much. I really